their SOPs need updates. So having a workshop with the authors over it to update it and align it, and also I've got a discussion about the HTMs as well, about them being upgraded in accordance to the building regs, which so that's another thread going on.
Yeah. So do you know do you know HTMO3, the ventilation one?
Yeah.
Do you know anyone from that one at all? Because I know the people that do it. If you need a contact, because
Right.
they're going to need some help, mate. Honestly, not having a go at them. They'll need some help with it.
No, I don't know the contacts as yet. I've got a meeting on the 27th, hopefully, about the building in relation to the building regs with HTMs. I've got a meeting about that on the 27th of this month, which is next week already. Time's just evaporating. Yeah. I know Tim Galloway is turning up at that meeting, who's a 2IC for building safety regulators we've heard of. He's showing up at that meeting as well.
Yeah, that's the guy's name from who does the ventilation side for it all. He's involved in all the HTM. Just send you his name, so you got it. I'll send you his details over, mate.
That's grateful, Paul. Thank you.
He's really good contact to have, mate. If you don't know him, he's got his own business. He does all the authorising for it. He's brilliant.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
He always rings me up about dampers and ducts, and I always dread it because it's normally like, yeah, they've got that round the wrong way, haven't they? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. It probably doesn't. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
Good. Okay, should we kick off? I'm surprised that there's a few people that had signed up but haven't come on. But I think we press on. What do you think, Richard?
Yeah. It's I'm surprised actually, because what we've been finding the last few months, that we're getting almost double turning up than the ones that have actually signed up. So it's quite surprising to have a few missing. But yeah, we might as well get on.
Yeah.
Shall I kick off with that, just with the Chris Waterman thing, just because it's quick?
Yeah, definitely.
Would that be a good idea?
Yeah, go on.
As you probably all know, we had a guest speaker, if you like, tail end of last year, Chris Waterman, who actually advises the Levelling Up Department. Oh, he's been a government advisor for many years, but he advises the Levelling Up Department. And he was basically explaining the Building Safety Act to MPs before they went and voted for it. Very good, very entertaining chap who's got some very interesting stories. We had to actually cut some of the things out of the recording because he shouldn't have said them. So that's always a good sign. Well, so he's coming again on the 9th of February. If you haven't responded to your invitation, I strongly suggest you do, because it's well worth hearing this guy. I mean, you're going to hear about the Building Safety Act right from the horse's mouth, as it were. Now, he's producing, one of the things he produces for government, and which he's now producing for us, is a sort of an easy reading guide to the Building Safety Act. Now, if I can just share my screen and find out where I put it. Wait a minute. There we go. The plain guide to the Building Safety Act. Now, he's sent through to me the... Sorry, let me work it out. Where do I share my screen? There it is. Oh, sorry. Tell me when you got it.
Yeah.
Right. This is his schemata for the publication he's doing. The actual text that he's writing for the publication, he's got a number of BIM4Housing people sort of working with him and sense checking it, each page of it really. But this is what he sent through to me, just to get a bit of feedback from you guys on if there's anything, just the way he set it out, or if there's anything that is glaringly missing. He's including actually the fact sheets which the government issued with the actual building safety bill, but then withdrew but Chris still has them, obviously. So he's including them in this because he thinks because he says they're actually of a lot of value, and it was kind of strange they were withdrawn. So if you just have a quick look at that, as I say, just so I can get back to it, if there is any feedback from you guys.
There's just one thing that jumps out at me, unless I've missed the plot as usual, is it does mention about secondary legislation in that scope on the right-hand side, but in that flow chart, if you want to call it the boxes, it doesn't mention the regulations. It mentions each section of the Act, which is great, but what about the regulations, which we know obviously are still to be coming in succession over the next 18 months. So that's the only observation that jumps out.
I see what you're saying. So basically, when the regulations come out, they should be included.
Absolutely, we need to refer to them because
very
devil's
good
in the
point.
detail.
Excellent.
And there will be also guidance replacing the fact sheets in accordance. So the terminology will be changing, evolving as it goes. So
absolutely, My understanding that he sees this as a movable feast is something that's going to be in ongoing development as the thing comes through. But I think it's good that it's very helpful that you're pointing that out.
It's not criticism; it's just observations. That's all.
Sure, absolutely, but it's something obviously that needs to be included. He needs to have that in his plan, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Has anybody else got anything on that?
I was just going to say, Richard, it would be really useful if he could do something, say how things are now and how they are likely to be in the future, almost a current state, new state, because internally here with our directors, they seem to think that this is something for everybody else to be worried about and not manufacturers. The manufacturing is at tier 1, so it almost feel like an impact assessment, if that would make some sense. Everybody seems to think that it's somebody else's problem, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not sure how far he wants to go into, I don't know, future gazing, as it were, and how much is purely it's kind of factual as opposed to potentially. I don't know. I will certainly pass on what you're saying. I'm just you know, I'm not exactly sure how. George, have you got a view on that?
No, sorry, I was doing something else, Richard.
It's all right.
I apologise.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll pass that through. Any comments you have, I'll obviously I'll pass those through to him.
Just Richard, sorry to interrupt there. Just to support Chris's absolutely spot on about is who, and we know all the duty holders, which is the client, stroke developer, principal designer, principal contractor. But as what Chris is highlighting, who is absolutely instrumental in the food chain of all this, which is the supply chain. What responsibilities they must do, but also what they need to do regarding upskilling themselves, regarding training, and all its intricacies about inspection.
Oh, that's a good yes.
I think what it needs is a 2-page, so it's impossible to put on one page as we've got in front. I think the second page needs to have a structure of all from the hierarchy of the client all the way down to the supply chain, and it's looking at a bottom-up approach, not just a top-down, as we always continue to look at.
No. I'm following you, and I'm agreeing
Chris
with
is
you
on
totally.
the ball there. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, we as you know, we record these sessions and do transcripts and high point documents. So I will actually send him literally what you guys have said.
Just to jump on it, and I think, look, I mean, this is, and I'm going to do this probably in a bit of a self-centered way, really, is that I think if we all understand, maybe as we maybe do in these forums, actually how you construct, how you do appropriate workmanship. I think the question really is, I think for me, is that, and you both sound the same thing as I think I'm going to say here, is that I'm really interested in the effect on what happens with Regulation 7. And the reason Regulation 7 to me is so powerful is because it doesn't tell you which way to meet the appropriateness of dealing with a hazard, there's many different ways of doing it. So I'm quite interested in what they're going to do around CPR, because just because something's CE marked, it doesn't mean it's appropriate to put it in certain instances. It's a bit like just because you've got a damper that's, or you could, I use your example, actually, I'll use you, Chris, it's from Siderise, right? So if you've got a 476 cavity barrier, it's under an ISO, and actually that's appropriate for certain circumstances. But if you've got a linear gap, then 476 isn't appropriate, it's an EN. And that's differentiating in Regulation 7, but you can't have something under 476 which is CPR because it's not European and under the European system. And that's the bit I'm really interested in, because what I've found is, and this is just in my adventure, is that people don't know the difference between EN and BS. They don't know the difference between what's appropriate and what's not.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it all the time, and just they have a habit of going, everything's got to be CPR and CE marked, and you go, whoa. It doesn't cover everything in labs. It doesn't cover everything probably in hospitals. No. It doesn't cover everything in like tunnel specs, because it's different requirements, different practice. Sit outside of that kind of thing. That's a bit I'm really interested in, because for me, the behavioural side of what the regulations say, and you say they sell the duty holders, you know, it's very copy of PD going back many years ago, but it's just got more onus put on certain people. So I don't believe the suppliers can fix a problem unless someone describes what the problem is for them to fix. There's no good going to a supplier and go, can you give me a barrier? What for? Just I just want a barrier. Here's a barrier. Is that right? I'll take it. And they go and put it on top of a door. That's what people are doing.
And invariably, Paul, this becomes a problem further down the line when somebody that does know what they're looking at is looking at something that's installed that's not fit for purpose, and everybody's looking, and that's when you get the blame game. Well, I asked you for this, but I told you I was, and it's just round and round in circles. So for us as manufacturers, we have to accept the fact that we've almost become partially part of the educational process, because a lot of our end users, some of them are very, very knowledgeable, but some of them have not got a Scooby-Doo. No, and we're ended up becoming de facto designers.
I'm just thinking of a good analogy here. It's like going to a grocer and asking for a tomato, then going back and complaining it doesn't go in your fruit salad, isn't it? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's that old chestnut.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
You sold it to me. No, that's it for me. Sorry.
Sorry. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I'd like. I was just picking up on what Paul was saying there in terms of people understanding and appreciating the importance of this. And I was just knocking something together. That's why I was not concentrating when you asked me the question. Can I just throw something up?
Yeah, is this for Chris?
I think it answers part of the Chris question, but
no, that's fine. No,
sorry, which Chris?
Sorry, right, it's for Chris Waterman.
No.
If we're going off tangent on to something that we need to discuss that isn't actually germane to Chris, can we just finish Chris first? Then I can give him the block of text.
Yeah,
just
carry on.
Literally. Is there anything else you think for this document that Chris should be including?
The only thing for me is just about how he thinks CPR works with this. That's I think.
That's fine.
Thing.
That's fine. Then I can give him this section of the transcript, and that covers him rather than a load of stuff that's not relevant to him. Okay. All right. Brilliant. Thank you. Cheers.
Okay.
Sorry, George. No,
not at all. No. So I was really picking up on what Paul was saying earlier. So if I look at I've just realised I've not shared my screen yet. So one of the things that we were looking at before Christmas was really from a construction point of view, is my project in scope? And some of you might have seen this. If you've got a project that has secured planning approval, demolition work has already started, it's still at the beginning of REBA 4, and it in this particular case, design is going to be completed by this quarter, and then it will hand over in 2024. Is that in scope? And will it be therefore exempt from Gateway 2 and Gateway 3? Now those questions should be relatively clear, you'd have thought. But when we actually asked specialists, we found that there was absolutely no consistency with the people who are subject matter experts as to whether it was or wasn't. And I thought that was really quite interesting and of concern. I don't know whether that sort of ambiguity. I know Jan's on the phone from Hill. What would you say on that, Jan? Or is he not there?
No, I was just on mute.
Sorry to drop you in it. I'm
not. My from what I gather, it's not clear, and no one's really been given an obvious picture as to what is going to be expected. I don't think.
Yeah.
I assumed anything building anything from October 2022 that is that hasn't had building control submission that is in scope, as in 7 stories and above, it will need to be Gateway 2 and 3 and building assurance certificate. I mean, I've got bigger concerns with them getting the numbers of people required to start doing this process.
Doing the reviews. I think everybody's got that. I
don't know what they're going to do, but
yeah, quite.
A little bit too. Well, they've had 2 years to sort it out, and I don't think it's getting any clearer, really.
No, exactly.
It's fast approaching.
So, to some extent, I think the view of the I think the view is that even if it doesn't, even if your project may not be called in, you've got the backwards liability. So therefore, you do really need to sort it out, because obviously people are wrestling with what the Defective Premises Act is going to bring in. So be interesting to understand from tier ones how seriously they're taking this.
Just to jump on that, sorry, George. I was going to just on Jan's point there and your point. I was going to say is that I think she covered it a little bit, didn't she, Hackett, in that fire safety conference with Trowels. I think what she basically said is that, and I'm not speaking for her, obviously, is that even if you complete before or you complete and after, the bottom line is it's going to come backwards. So the view I've got, and I'm not saying even I've got the whole buy-in internally to do this yet, is that if you're going to go at Gateway 3 and start handing a building over at the end, or even if it's before, you're better off getting it into an order where you've got everything, threaded out right back to your principal strategy and how the products follow through. Because when you are asked, you won't be able to prove provenance. So you've still got to get yourself into that kind of mindset. And I think the hard bit, I think, is, Jan, as well. I don't know if you've seen this, is that I don't really think, from what I'm seeing, that, and I'm not saying this is true or correct, is that I don't think the regulator that looks at this is going to have the capability to understand all the products, the interface between them and how they all work together. The reliance, even like with builder control, is still going to be on us to ensure that bit's correct. I don't think they're gonna be able to comment on it. I think they're just going to say, well, we've seen key standard numbers listed in the rest of it. The coordination's still down to you, so that risk isn't going to get removed by them. It's still going to sit with you. So the way I kind of try to explain it internally is that, and I still get this now, people go, well, building control looked at it and they haven't made any comment. It's because they don't understand it, mate. They don't get it. So
yeah,
I think that bit's going to still be there. So if someone's got it wrong at Gateway 1 with, the walls don't work of all the componentry in it, but you've got the right standards listing, you could say, all the products we said we're going to buy a CE mark, they'll just say, oh, that's fine. But they're not going to tell you that whether it fits or not, whether it all works together as a system, that's for you. And I think that's the bit that I think is going to cause the greatest, problem, because I think, was talking to someone the other day actually from MTC, and he said it as well. Is that everyone always says, "I just want the solution." Well, they're not going to give you the solution. You've got to work it out yourself. But all like business owners, all they want is the solution. They want it taken off of their desk, and this isn't going to remove that. I don't think. I think you're going to have to still go for the rigor of threading out products, interface them together, and looking at how it works as a system. You know, before the end, or you know, whether before that date or after that date, if they come back retrospectively and you've not got it, then they're going to get you. And I think the same principle apply to stuff that's not in, you know, the remit of submitting stuff to them. Because if building control guys call in the HSE, which is what they'll go to as their regulator, and say we're not happy with this, they want to see the same process anyway.
Do you think that the insurers are going to take an interest in this, Paul?
I think, from my experience, what happens is insurers are summation of what goes wrong in case law or fires or incidents, and that's how they latch on the back of it. And you can see that really. I think, you know, you can see that with Grenfell, can't you? As soon as Grenfell happened, you couldn't get PI, you couldn't get consequential loss. So if you had to move loads of people out of a building because of fire, you were paying for it. That was removed from insurance, and that's what I think insurers tend to do. There may be some upfront stuff that they may do, and I mean, there's people we can talk to on that, George, if we need to. People like I think Ian Abley might be good because he's the FPA and he works for the Risk Authority, doesn't he? So
that's a good point.
He's someone that could advise on what they're looking at, and we can get him in for a chat if you want. I don't think he'd be opposed to it. We do a bit of collaboration with him anyway on things. So that's how my brain kind of sees it. And I think my biggest thing is that I think everyone's, like I kind of said at the start, is that you can have all this stuff in primary and secondary legislation, but you can have a disclaimer underneath that says this doesn't mean you understand how to make things appropriate for circumstances, because that's not what he's telling you. He's telling you how we're going to come after if you don't do that bit.
Yes.
Does that make
absolutely.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So I think Chris has got his hand up as well. I'm going to shut up now.
George, definitely the insurance industry are watching and interested. I was with some people from AXA yesterday, and Paul's suggestion of talking to Ian Abley is a good one, because he can kind of synthesize all of the different opinions from the insurer's viewpoint. So it's worthwhile having a conversation with him for sure.
If you don't know him, George, I'll put you in touch. If you do know him, no
George knows. We've had contacts before, so shouldn't be difficult to do that.
No, he's been quite active at the weekend. I don't know if you saw the thing about New Providence Walk.
Yeah. I've seen him. He's, you know.
Yeah. So so that's obviously. So would you say that this is that's one aspect. The other aspect that we've got. Sorry, this is coming. We've got obviously the Building Safety Act. We've got the Fire Safety Act, and what has become clear is that those are two different regulators who are looking at things from a different perspective. The other aspect that I think we're tracking at the moment is carbon. So I think most of you know that we've got this partnership with Zero, and Zero are focused. That's now, when we started it 2 years ago, it got 20 members. We've now got over 800, and there's a lot of activity going on around that. But one of the things that's come out of that is that we're collaborating with a company called Materials 2050 to get embodied carbon information using the templator, so that can then go into product libraries. So the idea being that we've got a mechanism whereby products can be tested for their information requirements, and then if somebody then swaps something out, we've got a mechanism to track that those products have been swapped out, and therefore we've got the means to then engage with people like Travis Perkins. So one of the things that Paul's going to come on to in a minute is the work that he's been doing, or we've been doing together to track through the specification to the product selection. And an aspect of that we've been working on, this is with Bouygues, Balfour Beatty. We've now got ISG agreed to collaborate with it, Barclay Group, which is having standardized or having a library, a BIM4Housing library of data sheets. So manufacturers' data sheets, so that we've got a mechanism, at least at a basic level, to be able to have a common library that anybody can access to put together information. So that's something that we're getting underway, and we've got Lloyd's Register engaged in that process as well. And also I've got a conversation happening later on this month with BSI. So what we're trying to do at the moment is look at the collection of manufacturers' product data, but in a much simpler way than we've been trying to do with Lexicon. Lexicon we're very supportive of. We want that to move forward. But in the interim, if we've just got data sheets from manufacturers in as PDFs, then if we can create a library of that, it's going to make it a lot easier for people to track things through. So this is the product library that we've developed as ActivePlan, but it's free, and it enables manufacturers to provide their information either as a data sheet or as a document. And this is Materials 2050. So these are the people that are going to have they're going to put their information into the product library, but they've got carbon information on all of these product types. So it's just a different perspective, but the objective here is to, because I'm told that that constructors are being asked extensively for carbon information. So we've got fire safety, we've got building safety as drivers, but now we've got carbon as well. I'll just stop for a minute. Does that make sense to people that's what we're trying to, that we should be doing this?
Yeah.
Okay. You've seen this before, but the key thing about this is making sure that we're getting the right data for the right purpose. And one of the main questions that we've had is, you know, if for example we've got a cavity barrier, what information do we need to know about a cavity barrier? It's always, it depends. And because we've got so many standards that you've got to refer to, we need to tie it back to some prescriptive situations, which Paul's going to just go through there. So the work that we've been doing, obviously, is to try and look at how we can capture the information that's needed as documents, then as visual records, but then this issue here of how do we go from descriptive specifications to prescriptive, and we can bring the whole process forward so that work is being done much earlier in the process, so that we can address the gateways. I think I'll stop there now and just ask Paul, would you explain what we've been trying to do in the tier 1 group?
Yeah, I'll tell you what it is. Let me just bring my screen up as well. Hold on. I've lost you. Here we go. Put my camera back on for a second. Hold on, is it going to work again? That's it. Sorry, every time someone shares, it goes a bit funny. You can't get people start freezing. That's I've turned it off, so I do apologise. So look, there's a couple of things that have been kind of going on. Probably to explain is that there's many different things happening in the industry. One of the big things for me, and I've been trying to get this working with other people externally as well. It's especially things around. There's a thing I don't come across it. There's a thing that's been launched called the Passive Fire Knowledge Group, and I'll explain how this is all going to kind of tie together. Is that's the ASFP, BISA, and you've got the FIS and some people that that are common to this group are involved in it. And that was about getting the knowledge out around how passive fire has been selected, because one of the biggest issues, and I say my focus has always been around Regulation 7, is that fire stopping's a blasé term. It doesn't really exist. If you've got linear gap seals, it's a linear gap seal. If you've got a penetration seal, it's a penetration seal. If you've got a damper, it's a damper. It's got a seal, but it's a seal that's related to that test. Nothing to do with, say, penetrations or stuff that's associated with doors. It's completely different. So, where this all kind of ties in is that the big thing is that if you've got a process where you can enable the industry to behave in a certain way from cradle to grave. And the example I kind of used previously was, you look at things like CIBSI Code M, which in that terminology, it's about how people behave around commissioning management in buildings. Assign a design team, who should be involved, who's the specialist, who's doing what, who's accountable for what, and how it flows through the REBA stages. The problem with passive fire and even active fire is that there is no such code. There is like individual codes, maybe from, say, great organisations like the ASFP on things like maybe penetration seals part 3. There might be some stuff in the grey book on dampers, but there's nothing on code of practice about the whole action of it all. So what we've kind of done is looked at putting together how a code of practice would work in principle about how a design team should behave right from stage 1 through to completion, in the same way that Code M works, and very similar to how the purple book works from the ASFP, ADCAS, and the rest of them for penetrations, putting that into a way where you've got something that can follow. So, and all this comes back into groups like the contract group and BIM4Housing as well, because it's a contractual flow as well, how people should be appointed and who those people are and who those interested groups are for that process. So we kind of strapped it together. That doesn't mean though that any of that process tells you how to select a product. So if you imagine you've got a process which tells you how to act in order to get to classification of products, you need a process on how you select the product. So we kind of broke it into 2. The big thing, that the commonality of all of this, which is really key, is that the only way to kind of nail this is to get the BIM information completely right. You've got to make it so foolproof that when someone asks for a product, and this is going back to, I think, sidewise is your point here, Chris, earlier, is that if someone comes to you and asks for something, it's not a case of, I just want a 120-minute cavity barrier, right? I'm not saying that's just what you guys do, it might be on the floor barriers. It should be, I want something to meet this specific condition. And that condition should describe it as something as follows. I've got a building which is X height. This is the substrate that's being used. This is the rating that's been given to us from the fire engineer's report. And it might be an EI number, because that's what it basically is. It's got to last this amount of time. It should have a durability of X. It must be resistant to the follow. It must have an impact damage of Y. Do you know all those other things that come into it? It must be the substrates involved are concrete and aluminium. Whatever it is, it's got to be described properly. But there's got to be a route for how you've got to that description, then a route for how it's then, and it's also access installation and how you maintain it. Because you can give them something that meets it, but can you install it? That's the other thing. So we try to pick it all up just to set the scene. And what I'm going to show you is what we presented at Build Expo for that group there. And this is, George is going to be heavily involved in this. I'm trying to get the right project platform to run it on as well with George. So I'm working on that one, George. So just bear with me. You got it on the record. I'm still trying to do it. I'm just going to show you what it kind of looks like. I was going to turn my camera off because it will clash. Hold on. I'm going to use, I'm not going to use the one I used last time. I'm going to use the modified one, George. Just 1 second, hold on. It's not that, I've got so many of these things open, just bear with me. This one will do. It's not completely the right one, but it will do. Just 1 second, hold on. Let's just share this up. If I can get this to buzz along. Look, I won't be able to see your hands while this is doing this. So if you've got any questions, just ask me. So look, this is what we put together for the PFKG at the Passive Fire Knowledge at the Build Expo, right? When it was over in West London. What it was a case of is that you've got a process where you sit there, and these lovely things come from George. It's around gateway points, gateway 1, when it should be done, gateway 2. this is all about change management within Gateway 2, because that is never going to go away, right? And I'll explain a bit more on that as I go through. And obviously about how you hand it over. It's all this bit here which is key around all this BIM information. So I want to concentrate on this bit, and all it really is that someone's got to set the purpose group of the building's the key one. Is it high end? Is it high rise residential? Is it a student block? Is it a big high rise hotel? What's the shape of it, the depth, the height, the depth, the form of it, because this depicts what goes into it. Basement levels being below 10 meters, etc. Lessons learned from other projects that you've done in similar natures, things that you've learned. Then you've got to assign basically a safety review team. So no different to Code M. Establish who's going to look after all of it and who's going to be the lead for making sure it's strapped together. Then you've got to look at the risk of the space. The space risk depicts what the systems inside it should do, whether it's a door, whether it's a damper, a duct, a flue. It could be a cavity seal, whatever it is, and establish what those ratings are. Then you can start looking at all the classification types within your building, because the problem is when you go to planning at Gateway 1, this is just what I'm seeing. It's all very nice about I've got one staircase, I've got this escape risk, I've got peeps and the rest of it. But one thing in that though tells you all the different classifications of fire risk and what systems you need to deal with them within those reports. It doesn't go to that level of detail because it's not always a fire engineer that's capable of doing it on their own. Hence, you need to have this established. So I'll explain what it kind of looks like in practice for products in a second. Then you can start looking at all the seals in the building, how you classify the products that you want, how you look at the compatibility of the substrates and what you're building into, the supporting constructions. Then you look at the descriptor of the seal types that are appropriate to what you're doing, because it all depends on what's been tested and what is functionally, trying to do. Then you can look at the access and installation. Then you can start forming, very, very, like high level schedules of where these things fit, like builders work, so where they go. So actually you've got some rules around how this all fits as a system into the building. And if you want, you can go to manufacturers that they can give you a product, you can confirm it against it. So what I kind of wanted before, I said that anything you select in a building, and this is where I've drilled it down to, is that someone's got to establish, as I said, the fire safety type, the risk type of that building, whether it's sleeping, whether it's a high-rise hotel, student block or residential, what those risk types are. And that will cut those risk types is when me and George were going through this before. It's all about the space risk and the building type. And you've got to look at how those things operate, because a cavity barrier, if that's still the right term, I'm not too sure. You can correct me on that later, Chris. Whether it's a damper, whether it's a door, they've all got different operational states. So a damper static, it does not move out on the wall. It just sits there. It will just shut. That's a fire damper. A door's transient. You can walk through it. That is a barrier that is there for compartmentation that can swing both ways. It can be dual leaf, single leaf, one leaf bigger than the other. It can be powered. It can have, locks in the door for security. It's totally different to a damper. It's transient. Smoke control systems are dynamic. They perform a function. They extract smoke. They take compartment through a building to remove something. It's a different way of looking at it. Then you come on to, how those things are then classified. So this is like basically a damper. It could be a pose blade. It's classified like that. It'd be different for barriers, it'd be different for doors. Then you can look at the different wall substrates that exist, because there really is only two, isn't it? There's brick and there's, standard flexible, symmetrical. Then you can look at how these things are actually installed and accessed. So what I kind of went through it and said, look, if you look at the key duty holders, who holds the knowledge? Well, a fire engineer might hold that bit. An architect, no disrespect to architects, they'll know bits about some of this, not all of it. They'll know bits about this, not all of it. What I'm saying is they know parts, they don't know the whole picture, right? Same for this. If you look at dampers, an MEP consultant or building service consultant is the right term, will know bits about dampers and smoke control. They don't necessarily understand how those systems work depending on the space risk. There's a bit of a problem with some of that, because they're not the whole knowledge holder of that, because it depends on the type of building, the depth of building, the period of fire that's required for protection. It affects those operational types. Same with doors, it's security related. There's a security consultant that will know more about the function of the door in practice than the architect will, or the building services consultant will. Just to put it out there, principal contractors, no disrespect to us, we tend to pass risk down the line. Right, so it's all out of our knowledge really, because we're relying on specialists. That's why, Chris, when it goes wrong, we'll blame you. Just a joke with it. And you can look at, the specialist trades. So if you've got a drywall company, you know, who's a member of the FIS, like BDL or someone like that, they'll know how to build a wall, but they don't know any of this. And you look at the people that install the fire dampers, you know, or the smoke control dampers, they'll know how you install that, but they don't know any of this. They can't tell you that that is right for this. Then when you look at the product suppliers, like yourself, Chris, you can tell us I've got something that meets a classification number. You can't tell us where it's appropriate to put, whether you can install it, because it's a site condition and it's a summation of fire engineering, right? Same with the like BG and Canaf and Cineat. They can give you a wall type, doesn't mean it works for everything else. That's kind of like the conundrum, and like, you know, and to solve that problem where you go, how it's all strapped together and I get onto it is about knowing the installation is prescriptively in a digital format is what you got to get out of this. Then you know your quality parameters because you've gone through this process for a product. Then you know the benchmarking of it because all the previous bit is set. Then you can do the acceptance of information. You can do digital records. Then you can have future information for change management. This is all going to rely on good templating of all those properties for BIM and how it's recorded in that model as well. Some of it, I think we kind of agree, George, you'd have PDF held information, stuff that's all about the asset, which can go into the template, and you'll have stuff which affects the geometry. All those things are going to be important for each product to record. But again, it's all on the basis of what that risk is, what the operational type is, how it should be classified, how it's compatible. And that isn't just about one product. This is about all products going in one wall, them all being compatible. And I'll show what that looks like in a second, and how you install and maintain it for future. And that's really how, in my head, the whole thread works for construction. It should be no different. So when you look at, you know, you could take dampers, I did nick that from you, George, the doors, whatever. If you've got all of those in one wall, that wall's got to be working for the, you know, the summation of all of those parts. And I haven't got cavities on there, Chris. I do apologise. I didn't include cavities, but that's one that has to be tackled separately. Unfortunately, I've got to be like a dentist one at a time. So you go, well, that's compatible. Maybe it might be tested and work in that, but if the type of installation might not work in that, that might only work in that. It's not tested in that. So you got to get the kit and all this stuff in like a Rubik's Cube order to get it right to work with the one that you've got. And that's the bit that's kind of all messed up because, as I said earlier, is that not one person from one discipline, services, fire engineer, supply chain, can do it on their own. Someone's got to bring it all together. And that's the world we kind of live in. That's the bit that's not kind of happening. So to get into like whole process, what it looks like is that if you've got a thing where people are working to a passive, and this thing will get launched at some, and I will bring it fully into here once the race is fully done, so we can all have a good chomp at it. Because everyone's view is important, especially around wording and stuff like that. How that kind of operates, because some of these bits here may change. It's all on change. The key bit being for me is getting description and prescription right, which is where this comes into it, about how you do workbooks to get there. And I mean, some of these diagrams I've produced originally, I've been through them with, say, Paul White, who's the expert on smoke control. I've had to make them a lot simpler for, you know, like generally used to get like the IT for Dummies guides. I've had to bring it into a level where you've got nice pictorials to make it easier for people to understand. I'll show you what it looks like in a second. So you've got that where you can go, you can describe it, then you can prescribe the medicine to fix it, rather than you trying to say yourself, Chris, you know, describe it and prescribe it yourself, then getting blamed when the patient's dead, if you understand what I mean. It's the wrong way we've been doing it. Then it's about how this is all recorded, about how you've got there. So it's all within, you've got, I said that you've got PDF held, you can't see it on this, but you've got PDF held, you've got geometry, and you've got, you know, asset information held, and what that information is for one asset. Because it's not just REI, it's not just S, there's other things that are in there that are really critical to that product. Then you've got a process about how you form that in builders work. Because everyone was going to me originally, oh, the builders work processes don't work, nothing fits in walls. But it's not, it doesn't work in that. It's that this bit was never done. So you didn't even know what you were putting in the wall, whether it was right, wrong, or indifferent. But then when it comes down to how you put this stuff into builders work, you can't put it all into one schedule because, unfortunately, the test standard is different for all the products. It's got different boxes for classification to record what you're doing. The common part, which you have to make sure is on all of them, is that. Does that make sense? You've got a builder's work for that, a builder schedule for that. The commonality is the wall number that it goes in. Because at least then you know the minimum size of the wall and the type of wall is compatible with the product. If you put it all on one, it gets lost in translation. That's the key part to it. Then you can look at how you digitally record it when you install it the first time, then how you do your records of checking in the future. Because for me, the first installation is the big one. It's the wall type's compatible, the sill type's compatible, the support rod, the fixing's correct, it's in the right place. The last part of it is, yeah, the damper opens and shuts correctly. And for future years, all you're checking is the damper opens and shuts correctly, the door functions properly, and the surroundings haven't changed from what was recorded originally. And that's the only way you can kind of do it. So if I just go on to a bit of an example, and I explained this the other day, is that if you take, I've used fire dampers because I've done so much work on them. If you take a fire damper in a protected space, so you've got things from Part B, you've got things from the test standard, there's things in BS99 as well, but basically you've got ES category stuff that's required in protected corridors because smoke risk is the biggest problem. So you come down to it and you go, well, let's just tackle it in that terms, what actually it looks like if you were going to select it. So I went, okay, that's the same diagram for me. Let's concentrate on this bit first. What does it look like? Okay, so the purpose group of the building, the shape and the form, forgetting that part, then you can start reviewing actually what it looks like before you go on to the actual space risk. So I did it in a very simple diagram that said these are all your purpose groups that exist. That's like multi-story residential, that's dwelling houses and duplexes, prison, schools, hospitals. You've got high-rise sort of, or just like student blocks, places like that. Commercial office. Yeah, you know, knives and forks, which is obviously your dining out retail sort of categories, auditoriums, cinemas, factories, storage, and again, the biggest one at the moment, car parks, because every time an EV vehicle goes on fire on them, you lose everything. Then you've got obviously the height of the building is important, and so's the form. Because if you've got big basements or big heights, it affects, you know, the systems you have to put in them and classifications, you know. Then you've got space risks. So refuge has got a specific risk. There's smoke risks in buildings, there's fire risks, there's sleeping risks, there's evac, you know, is it phased, is it single? Lighting's a big one. Power critical supplies, primary, secondary supplies, both have the same level of protections, one primary, one secondary. Firefighting services. So if I picked a refuge, shape and form of the building is important because it affects how many escape stairs you have, how many of these sort of refuges you're going to have, but they have the refuge is the risk, the fire risk, and the smoke risk. That's what's in there. That's what I'm looking at for that space. Then you sort of go on and say, well, how do you then put that into a shape and form where you can look at how that space risk sits for that example? So we put this together and we went, well, if you look at a protected corridor which has got ventilation in and out of it, and it's it's got a refuge in it, you've got to protect against fire and smoke, which is your E category and your S. The time period varies on what the protection height of the building is. But because of Part B, it's always automatically closed by fire alarm activation. So they're always automatic. They've always got a power supply and a fire alarm interface. The big thing that gets missed is that you've got to pick the appropriate blade type to meet your Part L calculation. Because that's the bit that kind of causes it's the other add-on that affects it. So when you classify fire dampers, you can't just go, oh, it's ES120S, you know, 300 pascals from C10,000 where it is. You've got to go, well, it's got a blade type of X to meet this. And it's all those other bits that come into it. Obviously, the orientation comes into it as well, which I'll get onto in a second. So if you come to the next bit and you go, well, now let's look at how you classify that properly. Well, it's the same diagram, but I've just changed it. I said, well, actually, it's now an ES. It could be 30 to 120 meters, only be method 4, which is your automatic. It's that, but direction of fire is both ways. The plane of orientation is a vertical wall, so it's that. And the cycling's up to 10,000 cycles it's tested against. So that's my classification number for the product that I need. It doesn't mean it fits, right? I've got to pick one to make that condition. So, but before I do it, I need to do a bit of a comparability against how the walls work as well, surely, right? So there's only two types of wall, there's flexible and rigid, as we kind of know. Your stuff's all concrete, essentially, isn't it, Chris? So you go, well, these are all the type of frames that exist in fire damper terms on the market. I already know that bit of it because I got it from above. So if I pick a flange one, I know they work in that type of wall. Well, these ones have got other things like casting, you can only put it in brick. This one you can put it in both, but the one I'm going for at the moment is that. This one works in either, that one works in either, that only works in that only works in that, that'll work in either. because flexible goes to rigid, not the other way around. But even though that's tested in flexible, the studs and things are in the wall, so you can't put it in rigid. It would never work. Same as that. It only works in flexible. So you've got to have a not working knowledge of the kit that you're using. This kind of makes it easier for people to understand, at least ask the question. So anything else is classed as other. It's got to have been tested in anyway. So I can't do all the other types of wall. It's impossible. So, but the biggest thing is you've got to check the wall thickness against all the other components in that wall. Doors, ducts, flues, glass, whatever you've got in there. Is that wall type that you're going for and thickness that this works in, does it meet the requirements of all the other kit? And that's the sill types. And the reason I put the sill types on, it's important because if it's EN520 bold for that particular type of installation, generally what they are, and they've got mineral wool on them, what's that got to do with a passive fire protection company? Are they really the appropriate people to be putting EN520 on a wall when it's a dry wall and putting mineral wool in it? Just food for thought. I don't think they're the right people to do sand and cement, are they? You're still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a noise come up like something dropped out.
I was on mute as well. So
yeah, no, there was something. You only get the noise when someone falls off. It might be another meeting. So you got like a ablative bat. That's something that's common. They can probably do that bit. You know, gypsum plaster. I don't think I'd be getting a passive fire company gypsum plaster. So it kind of goes through all of that, so you can see it pictorially. It's the same thing, but on those big nasty Excel ones that I've issued before. It's the same thing, but it's a different way of looking at it. And it's about installation, access, and maintenance. So you sort of go, well, how does it work? Well, I know what that bit is because I've now drawn it all out so I can see it. I've got that type of damper, that frame, it's that blade, it's that position, it's that type of wall. I can determine that by going through all the other wall types to get to the 122mm determination. I know the sill type, but then I'll look at the access requirements. Well, these things need access both sides, and this is important because what's happened is everyone puts shaft walls in from an architectural point of view. Not having any shape or form of architects, they put a shaft wall in because it's a shaft. But as a builder, is shaft wall appropriate for all the products I want and actually how I want to install the product? Because you put a shaft wall in, this stuff isn't necessarily tested with shaft wall. I still need 500-600mm on the inside to safely install all of this stuff, screw it in, get in and out. I still need a door. And it's the same for the stuff in the floor. And I've still got access doors that need access for future for cleaning. It's still got to be there. You can't get away from it. And I need breakaway joints. Someone's got to form a breakaway joint as well. Do you know what I mean? So some of these dampers, like you see above, are quite narrow. Some of them are very long. You've got to pick what's appropriate for the condition as well. Then you can get to, that's what I want, and that's the classification number of it. And that's my whole thread and how I've got there because I've recorded it. Otherwise, you can't do it another way. And that's the kind of thing that's interesting for me, is that even with all the regulation, primary and secondary that comes out, it's not going to make people any better at doing this. That's the bit that's.
Yeah. So I've seen this. I've seen you go through this several times, Paul, and every time you do it, more of it sticks with me. But I think what we're doing here, we're identifying how complicated it is.
Yeah.
And as you say, everybody wants a simple answer, but actually the task itself isn't simple. There are many different decision points that have got to be taken, and you need to be able to inform each of those decision points with the right information at the right time. Yeah. So even people that have got all the knowledge, they still need the right data to make those decisions.
And this is the important thing, George, when you look at, because there's several views that my view is, and mostly is that getting procurement right would solve a lot of the problem, right? It won't solve the problem where, and I think this is, just to say it in the right sense, is that if you're a project manager, you look after a complex package like building services, it doesn't mean you have the capacity to select or to verify that products have been selected correctly, because you're a project manager of a package. Doesn't mean you're technically competent to get it right. So if you're relying upon, and this is where these diagrams are prevalent, if you're relying upon the fire engineer to have got the damper selections right, you think again. If you're relying on the architect to get the wall to work with it, you think again, right? because it's about site-specific case. They don't know what you want to use, because the drama's been that everyone pushes selection down the chain because that's where the best value is. The best value is getting the right description and hopefully a prescription at the earliest possible stage to meet that condition.
Yep.
And everything else then becomes a lot easier, because even if you got, because even if you take drywall, there's distances, minimum distances and things depend on the type of wall you're using between where you put holes, but that's specific to all the things you're putting in the wall. If you know the thing you put in the walls right in the first place, that's one less drama to worry about. We're not even getting that bit right, because to follow this makes things a lot easier, because you're going through an actual process which should bring it back into an order about how people should behave to get there. The bit I'm still trying to work on get done is this process for each individual product selection. So doors will be different with a similar flow on this, with the same, but the selection of classification and things, when you come down to this part here, these diagrams will be different on here, because you've got to look at doors in specificness to doors. It might be they swing open, do they swing like both ways? They swing one way, are they dual leaf, single leaf? That kind of stuff's got to be declared what it is for the location. And this is the hard bit. So if you did a door schedule, that door schedule really should become a builder's work schedule in the future for the doors. And it should have on it the wall type number, which is then the same as the wall type number on, say, a damper schedule.
Yep.
That's really all it comes down to. And I think if you cast your minds back, I remember being back at my days at Canary Wharf, and door schedules and damper schedules were quite specifically common to the wall types they were going in. I haven't seen that for about 15 years. People are relying on a pacified company to come in to do all of this on a schedule. It just doesn't work. You've got to do it by individual schedules. That's the only way you can narrow it down. And by de facto, I think
That's interesting.
You see, if you do it on one schedule, the classification's different.
Hmm.
And the thing is, if you got to look at human error, haven't you? Right? Is that if you have a situation where you're relying on one person, and I'm trying to be careful how I say this because I know things get recorded, but if you're going to give a builder's work schedule to someone, you don't give it to the top engineer in an architectural practice if they're the ones that are doing it. You give it to the junior to strap it together, and you might go and check it. But the bottom line is that it has to be set off in such a way that's right from day one. So there's always that infallibility that occurs.
So coming back to the door schedule there, are you saying that what people have done to, in theory, try and simplify things, they've tried to put all of the door schedules onto a single form, or in a single format, whereas what we actually need is one that's specific to that particular context?
Yeah, I think what happens is when you look at a door schedule, and I haven't got an example to show you, but for ones I've dealt with, they might have a door number, and it might tell you ironmongery, if you get one, that is, because you don't always get one. I think everyone agree with that, right? What you've got to have is the risk category for the space as well, what its classification is to that space, and all the other stuff that goes with it. Your part M requirement, your part L requirement. The commonality is it's the wall type that's used. It's got to be the same as a wall type that's used in, say, a damper schedule. So in that wall, those two things are consistent with that wall.
Yeah.
So everything that's in that wall, and the minimum thickness that's required for that wall. If you haven't got a product when you do it, then you don't know what the minimum thickness of wall type is. Because the hard bit of all of this is that doors are either tested in flexible or rigid. I don't think you can go from flexible to rigid on doors. I don't think that rule applies, but it does to dampers. It doesn't apply to lift doors. It doesn't apply to flues. Probably doesn't apply to glass screens either. It does apply to pipe work. You can go from one to the other, not the other way around. So you've got to get to a system where you make it a lot less infallible for people to get it wrong. And the starting point is that the builder's work is only a summation of not doing the whole selection process correct in the first place.
Yes.
That's all this really describes, is how you would do a selection for one piece of kit for one risk space. You could pick others if you wanted to, and you can add more. I can add more onto it. But it's to give an example of how you select a product for one space.
Yeah, and it's a decision tree, as it were.
Yeah, and all that is, it's a representation, George. And this is the let me see the right one. I think this is the smoke control one. That's 5 dampers here. All that is taking. Actually, I think I've got it on the other one. 1 second, hold on. So yeah, all it is taking that complication and putting it in to that process tree in pictorial terms. That's what I've done. So it makes it easier to follow what this means in practice by those diagrams. It's the same thing.
So as we've discussed, you've done this for fire dampers. I think you've also done it for smoke dampers, have you?
No, that's the next one.
Yeah.
Smoke dampers is a bit more complex, but
and doors.
Doors would be. I'm going to try and get through all of them. The big thing I said before, George, I need to do is just agree how the template looks for BIM. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Because once that's done, because I think, and I'll ask Chris this question: if you're a manufacturer and there was a sheet that described everything that could ever be needed to be known about one cavity barrier in one location, you just said tick off what you want. It's a lot easier, isn't it, than you trying to guess.
What you've done, Paul, is you've, albeit for not our particular product group, you've taken me through all of the highs and lows and the journey of getting to the right product for the right application.
Yeah.
And it looks at first glance to be quite complicated, but it's not. But what this would give is a little bit more rigor, all manufacturers want to know is, what is it that you want to know about my product? What is it that will help you to select the appropriate product? And if this is the route to go down, then absolutely fine, because the answers are there. You've just got to put them in a way that's systematic and everybody can understand them. Because at the moment we have every project goes down a different route in a different way. And you have, depending on, someone comes to the door and says, I want a cavity barrier. And then this process that you've highlighted starts. Probably, to be fair, Paul, not to the same degree of rigor, because there comes a point where you have to say, look, some of the questions they've been asked, the people that are posing and seeking the product don't know the answer to them either. And they're always working under time pressure. So there comes a point where they make sacrifices or kind of judgments that they might not have made had they gone through this process in the first place. This work has to be done. What this gives to me is you're front loading the decision tree. So when it gets to site, a lot of the problems that are ironed out, because when it does get to site, there are some things that have happened that you can't change, like the wall type is wholly inappropriate for what you're trying to do, or things aren't in the right place, or you can't get access to fit. And we'll get a picture of some. So can you put a cavity barrier in there? I'm first going to say, well, how the hell are we going to fix it?
Do you know what? And do you know what it is, right? As well, is that I say this loosely, right? Is that when you take your mental cinema, someone said to me the other day, your mental cinema is crazy. And I thought, I'm going to use that word, right? When you take your mental cinema and you put it to paper and you go, well, actually, subconsciously, when I was doing big projects, this is how my brain was working for that particular item. If I was doing stuff on air source heat pumps, I've got a different way my brain goes around it in relation to occupancy, because it affects the type of kit you need and gases and the rest of it. It's a different subject, but the same process goes on. The issue is that when these things go right, no one ever looks about why they went right. All we're doing still as industry is going, in business terms as well, is that, oh, that job's gone wrong. Why has it gone wrong? Well, they just didn't get the right kit. All the jobs have got the right kit, they don't go, how do they get to that summation? Does that make sense? Is that if we all did this right, we wouldn't be talking about it, would we?
No.
And we're talking about how we can make it go right. But when you run it on a job and it goes right, and this is the barrier that kind of exists. I'm not sure because I can't say anymore. I'm not sure if you agree with this, Steve. Is that to get someone to follow this on one project, including using that flow at the top, and I'm going to try and run this. And this is why I need you, George, to get involved with it, right? I'm going to run it on a project coming up, and I'm going to force the teams to follow, because there's a ratio that exists to follow and use that philosophy. The problem I've got is if I've got a job that's coming over here and it's already gone for the Bolton of Gateway 1, I've still got to go back and verify all of this. So that's the bit that's going to cost the time and the money. But out of it, I need to have good templates for the kit that's selected, good schedules. Everyone's got to be on board to do the hard graft at the start. And I think history tells me it's a bit like that song, you know, Tequila, you know, Tequila, that's the PCSA period. People just sit back and relax thinking that they're all arguing about number and program, but all this stuff just trickling down the line. But this is where the real graft is. Do you know what I mean?
I think the point is that it's also a way of evidencing that the decisions have actually been taken in a auditable way.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's the sort of thing. Can we open this up to the wider audience?
Yeah, I've got a meeting on the 31st of January. I'm just going to go through it because this conversation, I'm going to get it opened up because I want to get it opened up in such a way where we've got you recognised in the process side of it, George, as well. So everyone gets, because other companies are already involved in it. I want to make sure because the key bit to this is this bit. That is, if you look at a bridge, that is the bit in the middle that holds it all together. That is that lynch, this bit. And that's the bit.
I can see that, yeah.
With that bit there, and we'll make it a bit easier in the templater, you can unlock it, because even with the 8644 thing, it doesn't do all of this. It does maybe 6 of them. And that's the issue with 16950 as well. It doesn't understand this. And this is why, like going to Jan's point earlier, is that if you think the regulator is going to do this for you, think again. No. They're not. I've got, even internally, I've got a guy that's done a fire audit. It's no disrespect to it, but it won't work proactively. It'll only work reactively. Does it make sense? Because they're asking for, is the damper C marked? And I'm going, well, I don't really care. I want to know it's appropriate for the circumstance. That's a different question.
Well, one of the things that I think the penny hopefully is starting to drop is that under the new legislation, you're not going to be able to transfer risk. Whereas that's the way the industry works. Everybody transfers risk. But my understanding is that's no longer. I don't know if Steve's still on the call.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, but
off the screen on.
I think that's right, isn't it, Steve?
It's supposed to be in CDM, but it's not being policed properly. And this regarding high risk buildings will be policed based upon what Paul's flagging up, and we all realise is will the building safety regulator have the resources, let alone an individuals know what they're looking at. Hence the situation is with the client and the design team and everyone on that project to come out. This is what we've selected, and it's important, as Paul's been flagging up, as we all know, procurement is the Achilles heel. If we don't plan the project properly, sufficient time of selecting all these products that are actually workable, and ideally, in the ideal world utopia, that we got who's going to be running this building alongside to how they're going to operate, maintain. That it's absolutely crucial.
On that point, we've got a couple of people on the call, hopefully, in Andrew Holly from Tower Hamlets, and also Bex from Live West. Would either of you have a view on this? And Andrew, would you have a view on it? Are you there at the moment?
I'm very interested. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I mean, what Paul was saying is, I mean, I think I know a lot about some stuff, like most of us, and then you meet people like Paul and you go, actually, I know nothing. But equally on the other side, we've got people going, what's wrong with pink foam? So, you know, there is a huge amount of stuff, and I would say that understanding is important. And as I understand it, the regulations say stop trying to do what Chris was saying, I think, which is you get called to site to a wall that's already there and go fix it, and you go, well, I can't now, it's too late. The regulations say we all need to get together very early on. And so the architect says, look, I want to put this wall in here. It's a lot cheaper and quicker and easier to put up. And we want to save some money. So I'm going to put this wall in. But in that wall is going to be a door. and is it going to be secure enough, or you know, or is it too wobbly, or for security, and is it right to put a damper in it? And then everyone should be there basically around the same table saying, look, if you change that wall to this, it'll suit my product and that'll be fine. And the other guys go, well, that won't work for us because it's an issue. And you solve all the problems at that point. And so instead of saying what is the wall type, you say my wall type needs to be.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So you do that much earlier on, saying, look, if this is going to be a wall that has a damper in it, then the wall needs to be at least this type to enable it to do.
And therefore,
solving the problem afterwards is classically the problem, and that's but the basics of the regulation. But Paul's process, even to me, and I think I sort of, I know I teach people about fire safety quite a lot, and yeah, there's a lot of detail in there, which to me just comes down to, and the specialist needs to tell us what we need to do there. You know, it's too specialized, even for me. It's too. I understand it, but it wouldn't be a process unless I have that detailed knowledge and working on it all day, every day, that I'd really understand it. So, and then at the end of the day, the HSE are going to do the usual questions. So this is not about the planning process. This is the HSE under the Building Safety Acts, and they'll just say, how do you know? How do you know? How do you prove it? And you have to go back and back and back and go, we picked this wall because of this, and we fit that there because of that. And you make sure that the specialists are involved at the earliest stage.
And that you've got the evidence that they've done it properly.
Yes, and that's the thing. And someone's like Paul's thing saying, look, I picked this because of that, and it's in this wall because of that. And I have, you know, as the person who picks the damper, they have done due diligence, and I know that they've done due diligence because they've done that. And they're not just relying on, well, the bloke in the wholesalers said it would be okay.
Well, the other thing that I've discovered through the last couple of years, the perspective that as long as we go to a certified and approved supplier of fire doors, we don't need to do any more than that. We don't really want any more information than that, because we don't want to be exposed to that. Now, that's clearly and patently not working, right? And the reason I say that is that we're working on a large scheme at the moment, and they've done an analysis. The constructor has done an analysis, and fewer than 25% of the brand new fire doors that have been installed have passed their criteria. So 75% of the newly installed doors have failed.
Is that the installation part of it? I presume, not less than manufacture.
I think exactly. Yeah. It's the installation, but these have been installed by, because obviously, as far as fire doors are concerned, you've got the manufacturers, but you've also got the fabricators, and that's a bit of a grey area, because the fabricators, the people obviously that are putting together the whole thing, I don't know whether it's just the installation. It may also be the selection of the ironmongery, for example. You know, so
change of ironmongery. Yeah, I mean, I've had a very basic thing with residents. You know, I said take a fully tested door with all the ironmongery, and then they go, can I put a different knocker on it? No, pick one that's been tested, that's part of the whole kit that's been tested. Can I put a different letterbox? Look, listen to me. You have to pick it from the manufacturer. You know, that is tested, and as long as it's in their range that is been tested with that, you can pick it within their range. But then don't just take it off and put what you want on it. You don't understand. But when we're talking about very basics, like don't put pink foam, behind the architrave. There is a long journey for us all to do, because we've got a lot of buildings we are taking apart at the moment and going, the door looks fine, but the wall is wrong. The gap that was left in the wall for the door frame is far bigger than the door frame, and then backtracking and trying to fill the gap means the right product's in the right place. Cool. But getting it right in the first place and everyone understanding it, I think a lot of it comes down to training and slowly people picking it up that there's a lot more pre-planning required before anyone starts building a wall and then saying I can't put that duct and that pipe work next to each other through the same wall in the same space. As you say, I can't get to it and I can't put the right product in now because then I can't sign it off. So earlier the
really
better.
Interesting, right? And I just want to bring something back up just to give an example, right? And this is some of the stuff that I've come across, Andrew, right? So it'll be interesting to talk. Wrong one, hold on. It's got the wrong page. Hold on. If I come back onto, oh, that would do, doesn't matter. If I come down to the bottom, I'll give you the example. Is that when you look at this big thing in construction around contractors' design portion, right? This is where it becomes the problem exists, right? Is that I could be frivolous and say, just give me a fire damper. But someone's got to say,
fair enough. Well, people would, do I need a damper? Yeah, where is it? Yeah.
Well, this is where it becomes very difficult, is that, and I'll give you the examples that I've seen, right? So if you take this, I've seen jobs, it's gone past me again, where what they've done is they haven't selected an ES, they've selected an E, which is this, right? So first of all, it's not motorized and it should be, and they've installed it, right? And it's not just like one of these have been installed. I've seen one with 140 of them, right? On a phased evacuation situation. Now, the problem isn't just the fact that this needs to be changed to an ES. The wall type was wrong as well. So it's just the wrong type of wall, installation method, everything, right? Because they've used a passive fire company that doesn't understand dampers. I'm thinking by going to the market and going cover an FD, they've got an FD, they've just got one of these, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing is part L, is that this has got maybe parallel blade might have 60% free area, opposed blade might be 50, single blade might be 60% free area, 65% free area, maybe 70. The ventilation duct's all the wrong size as a consequence. So ventilation doesn't work when you put it in, right?
Yeah, because the damper's closing half of it off. Yeah.
2 watts a litre has gone, which is your part L. It's all finished because of that bit wasn't done right in the first place. And the same parallel, I think, exists with doors. But also, just to get on with it, is if I go down to the installation method at the bottom, which is now flying off my screen again, which is very useful. 1 second. I go into this picture at the bottom here quickly. Let's move you down off of there and just put that up. Is that if you've got displacement systems, and this is under the floor, there's a minimum height that floor can be to put the ventilation under the floor for displacement. And the fact is that when you start looking at the access and maintenance and the riser's been made, it could be an open riser that's all nice and big. You get the situation where the slab design's actually wrong as well. So if you haven't gone through a process at the start to make sure that this shape and form's right, that's in the right place, the slabs are in the right place, your structural design's wrong as well. And that's the bit I'm seeing as well. Structures are being built wrong because the structural engineers just want to get on with it. I'm going, well, hold on.
Yeah, where do you want them to put the hole? Yeah.
I need the specific size. And if it's too big, I've got to try and shrink it up. But actually, if the kit is under the floor, as in that bit, get rid of that quickly, you're sitting down under, I don't know if I can do it. If that bit is sitting under the floor here and it's a displacement system in an office building, if that line's wrong and there's no slab, or the slab needs to shrink, the slab design's wrong. And this is what we're kind of coming across, is all these different factors are coming into it, because you've got to go through this kind of rigor for, and dampers to smoke control, very similar with this kind of rigor of installation, how you require to get at the seals, same as flues. Even doors need access both sides, generally install the seal as well. You've got to have that space to do it. We shrunk things down so small, you can't actually do it in practice. And where I'm coming to is that I have it where people maybe ignore us and I go, okay, you've ignored us, I've told you. When it comes to site and they go, we've got issues, we can't get someone to do the seal, what do you do? I go, we've got to make it bigger. There's penalties against AFLs, all this other stuff kicks into it. And I go, I can't help you because to make it fire safe is a combination of all these parts, not just getting a product. So I have to verify they've actually got the right product initially, that number's right. They've chosen a frame that's applicable for the wall type that's being used, the wall type that's being used with all the other components, that bit's right. I've got to verify all of this, otherwise I can't verify I can actually fit it on site anyway. So it all does come into it.
Paul, we've just got 5 minutes left, and I've got a quick request to make to people. What I'm trying to do is to connect with some fire engineers, because I think that we need to engage some fire engineers in what we're doing here, and I wondered if you know, on the call, Andrew, do you know? Could we compile a list of people that we know who are fire engineers?
I mean, we've got a couple of fire engineers we're using, you know, but even then, they're limited in their specialisation. Sometimes you think actually they're not as great as we thought they were, you know, or they duck and dive because they're the ones with the insurance liability, and they all often, they'll say verbally that this is fine, but if you say, can you put it in writing, that's been sure. So there are people out there, but whether or not they are yet, there are enough good people to
they don't
get
it's
involved.
problem is, Andrew, they don't know. This is I mean, we've got Alan Curran who does a bit of work for us in the other thing from it's going to come back to me in a second. They do all the CLT as well. He's involved in that because I've done a lot of work with him on products on sites, because fire engineers do not understand products. They understand, and I don't mean it to sound wrong, but you've got to look at it in the field of expertise.
Yeah,
Pipe, shape, form, it's on fire. This is how you run. This is your hose. This is how you get out. This is the type of systems you need to protect it. That's the hazard class and all the rest of it.
Yeah, that door, but their detail on the damper will be that damper will close. That's it. That's it. So they work out where the compartmentation lines will be once the damper's operating, but they won't have enough information to know whether the right damper's in the right place. Unless, and then you've got other people who I've used. So people who are interested in that sort of thing is the AOV guys, of course, where they can do computer modeling of where smoke will go.
Yeah.
So they're Fire Safety Services, I think, they're quite good. Who work with SE controls, of course.
SE controls, all nice people.
Yeah, very good
if
people.
You look at things
but again,
like,
they've got that specialisation, and I think often what it comes down to is when you're putting a complicated piece of kit in, you know, like a damper or an AOV product, they really got to lead on a lot of other things from the very early stages, don't we? You know, rather than it being, I think the problem is people think you build the building and then someone else comes along on second fix and starts fixing the bits of kit to the wall. You know, and so there's got to be a much bigger understanding of actually you got to make the hole right in the right wall or floor in the first place, don't you?
Chris has got his hand up.
I think that I could think. I mean, I agree with a lot of what Paul and Andrew have said. Some fire consultants or fire professionals, their knowledge on product types and what they do and what they don't do is quite limited. However, there are a few that do know their onions, and there are some that have gone from manufacturing and product selection into that. And if you could give me a brief, George, of what you're looking for them to do, I'm sure I could come up with a few names. So I've just popped a few up there. I mean, Merle from DXC, ex-Manchester Fire Brigade, did a dissertation on external walls, did fire dampers, knows his onions, knows his stuff. You can have a conversation with him. And there are a couple of guys at BB7, OFR, I could think of Tenos as well. These guys do have more than a passing nod and might be worth having a conversation with, but I probably need a brief from them just to kind of get some ideas of what exactly is it you want from them, and then I'll make some suggestions, George.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't really know what we want. I was really looking to see.
What you need then, George, is you need Paul to write you an infographic to show you what it is that you want, and then when you tell me what you want, I can tell you I can get you.
I think it's actually quite simple. All of this is that we're now in the stage, right, that I think if you break it down, that fire engineers, and it's the construction blame game, isn't it? Right? Oh, it's all the fire engineer fault. Oh, and Chris chose that product. It's your fault, because the bit in the middle is not getting strapped together because you need all those duty holders to come together to form it correctly. But I think there's an issue around competency and skill anyway to do that, and that isn't just the design team and suppliers. It's us as tier ones. We're if we're in control of a design build contract, we need to make sure it's strapped together right, and that's the bit we've got to get better at as well. So it's a kind of dual effort. But the bit I think for the fire engineering community, and I do a lot of work with them, is it's around product selection, how product selection meets space risk, and that's the conversation. Getting people's insights into what they know, because if you ask a fire engineer to go to a site and inspect a smoke control damper, they'll go, I don't know. Yeah, they don't know about the rods, the thickness of the rods, support distances, the connection detail, the insulation thicknesses that go with it, but they don't know.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? So it's that kind of thing. It's a bit like you said there yourself earlier about AOV systems. It's a bit like if you look at smoke control shafts in materiality, smoke control, but like these extract systems from corridors, is a smoke extract system, which descriptively, not prescribing, descriptively, because it's like if it's a firefighting shaft one that's extracting for that, it's a 2-hour shaft. It should be a 2-hour fan with a 2-hour damper, both directions. If you've got override switches, they should possibly be MA, manual intervention as well, or don't have the override switches. And the material that extracts it should be ductwork. That's what part of the standard is. People use drywall. Is drywall appropriate? I think it is, but that's the thing. Things that come into it. So you can't ask an AOV manufacturer to confirm all of that. Someone needs to tell them, that's what I want. Now do my CDP element. I'm making sure that it vents correctly, the pressure drops are fine, and the materiality selection meets my description.
But so if we roll back,
yeah.
So if we roll back to what the exam question is my building safe? So if, for example, on some of Andrew's existing buildings, which it, 90% of your work is going to be on your existing buildings, isn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So therefore, once we've gone through and we've done surveys, we've captured the asset data as we can, then at some point somebody is going to have to review all of that and look at that from a perspective to say, well, from the information that we've got, this is the level of risk for that particular building, and this is what we need to do to improve it. And I was thinking, maybe wrongly, that a fire engineer would not know all the answers, Paul, but would be part of that group that would make that recommendation.
It's those 5 pointers, George, isn't it? Fire engineer, the shape and form, and what those space risks should be. You need someone then to help how that applies to the product that you want and the classification of that product. But it needs cross-pollination because, someone said it I think on LinkedIn earlier, is that the days of the kitchen sink specification for smoke control needs to come to an end, because they ask for everything, including the kitchen sink. But actually, no one actually knows what they wanted. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you've got to laugh, haven't you? It's
it's knowledge of they say about knowledge, isn't it? It's some things you don't know about that.
Yeah.
And other things are so off our radar, we don't even know that we have to ask the question. It's the don't knows. We don't know about the don't knows, and they're the ones that are worrying, because you carry on doing things in ignorance and then find out later that actually there was a load of stuff you weren't even on your radar and you really needed to have dealt with. And the problem is everyone knows that. Everyone knows that we can't all be specialists, and so my friends in Southern Housing, for instance, have been putting together their building safety case as an early example to the HSE, and a lot of them are getting it rejected very frequently because they're going certain far down the road on proving why their building is safe, but they'll get to a bit where they haven't really proved. There's some assumption there. Okay, you've got a damper and it's, as I say, CE marked and it looks okay, and the right people appear to have maintained it since, but how do you know that they know that that's the right product in the right wall?
Yeah,
oh yeah, we haven't got that bit. Oh yeah, I didn't know that bit.
Yeah.
You know, and then you go back to the builder who originally built it, and they go in, oh, I don't know either. And then you're trying to retrospectively come up with a design. And a lot of our buildings, we're trying to do retrospective strategies for them. You know, as you say, you get a riser with which is an open riser all the way up the building. It's one big compartment, and then it's got a floor in it, but the floor is only 3/4 covering the floor, and there's a little gap. And you go, well, is that supposed to be a closed cavity or is it supposed to be open? You know, I don't know, because nobody knows. And trying to find that history and trying to prove to the HSE that it's safe because. And then they go, well, how do you know? Because. And it goes deeper and deeper. And they haven't got very far. They've got a long way, but no one yet has passed an HSE.
I'd be interested in talking.
Like.
Is that Bradley Cooper or Stuart that is doing that?
Yeah, partly. And my colleagues, Gary Bage, who's a senior,
Gary, yeah,
Gary Bage, senior building safety manager, who I used to work with, and he's recently moved over there. And they're saying, it's interesting, but the HSE aren't being the specialists. They're saying you provide me with the specialist proof. And I think everyone's going to have to do that, but that does mean each of us need to understand someone above and below us a little bit, and then they then take their bit and take it, and then you get more detail in one direction and more generality in the other, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's too much. We can't work in silos. That's where the issues come, and we need to plan and deliver earlier or for new build. But it's harder with existing buildings because it's just there, and a lot of the paperwork doesn't show it, does it? You know.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we need the templates to standardize the way the information is structured, so that we can, as you say, go up and down the line, as it were, so that we can remove some of those sort of data silos.
Yeah. I think just I know we're running out of time, but I think the big thing is for me is that, and this is where the key part is that you're right about the knowledge holders is the problem. Getting them together to collaborate is like a code of how they should behave, but it only works properly if you've got something which makes the infallibility less infallible, if you understand what I mean. It's just, get the wording right, so that if you go to a manufacturer and you go, I need a fire door, they go, all right, is the template sheet we use for Revit of all the asset information, can you tick what you want? Because certain parts will be, if you haven't got any of this, then what's your security? You got security on the door because you're not asking for anything.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't done
I'm guessing some of those systems could work almost like elimination, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you have all the products available, and then you say, because I've got this, eliminate that. Because I've got that, eliminate that, and you end up with 2 or 3 products that are possible because of all the other conditions you've
that would
prescribed.
be the
and
ideal.
Hopefully, yes, you eliminate it to a product and not eliminate it to actually nothing's available, and then you have to go back to the drawing board and go, well, actually, I need to change my wall. That sort of thing, isn't it? But for manufacturers to be able to show, either they got to improve their range. You might find the manufacturers have got a gap analysis, then goes, actually, we never make a product that would work in this scenario, and actually nobody does, and it would be useful if we made one.
It's interesting
because people, instead of someone fitting the wrong products, they actually make a new product that actually works where it needs to work. Because it's more common than they thought it was, or something.
Yeah.
Can I just say, can I have a minute at the end?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just one last point on the point there from Andrew. One of the things to bear in mind about gap analysis, right? And this is just, if you look at all the damper manufacturers, so I'll deal with Trox, Mandic, Action Air, BSP, Advanced. I'll deal with most of them. They're stuck in a test standard with 2 types of support and construction: flexible, symmetrical, or rigid. Now, the issue comes down to is that when you start looking at things like shaft wall, is that if you test one of their piece of kit in a BG shaft wall, it doesn't necessarily mean you can put it in a Cineac shaft wall. because it's a different wall. It's not a standard supporting construction. There's limitations to how you can apply it. So I don't think it's really for the manufacturers to sort this out. It's about, you know, from sequence and building, us to identify what we want to use, then going to manufacturers and saying, if you haven't got anything, can you test something that works a bit? Because a test in both direction, you won't get any change out of 60 to £100,000. And that's a lot to put on a manufacturer. It's a bit unfair. My view is it's totally unfair to ask the manufacturers to read my brain when I don't know what I want. That's what's been going on. Does that make sense? You know, just to put it into that context, testing's expensive. It's very limited to what you can extend it to. If it's not a standard supporting construction, it becomes very, very tricky.
You know, my understanding of going either side, I think maybe more products don't need to be seen as a product. You almost need to sell them as, I mean, lift shafts are a bit like this. You know, if you want to build a lift shaft, it looks like this. There's the whole thing. Yeah. So ducts and shafts and dampers should be sold as, here's a damper in a thing. So it's a damper in a wall. It's not a damper that goes in a wall. It's a damper in a wall. So if you want to buy our product, here's the wall also. So you provide the wall part, we'll provide the damper, and everything will go together. Whereas I think it's, you know, it's like the picture of a catalogue, isn't it? You just see it in midair. Here's a damper. And you sort of go, as you say, I need to see it in a wall because then I'd know which wall it would work. And then you'd know that the wall and the damper go together, and you can't change one without changing it. And then the interchangeability will be.
And I think that's the point. That's the point we're kind of making, is that even the manufacturers are doing it, people are still getting it wrong. But if you've got a sheet that comes in where it tells you and you have to tick it, it's gonna come up. Can't do it. Do you know? And that's you've got to have that.
So you've got to change something. You've got to change something to make it work. Yeah.
As I said earlier, the tier one contract not having a go is that generally we rely on everybody else to get it right, and they can't because it needs someone to bring it together. That's it.
Yeah, sometimes because you've made the decision too early about something else, maybe for cost. And never. Why would it ever be that? But no, we all have to do that. We've all got a budget to try and either get more from or that have less cost. So yeah, the easier it is to get it right in the first place earlier on.
Well, this actually brings me on perfectly to what I was going to say. The design group have spent most of last year looking at 3 specific issues. One around early engagement of consultants in the design process. One around change management in between gateways 2 and 3. And the other around completeness of documents. Now, they put a lot of work into this. So what I'd like to do, they now want to put it out to the different working groups to get your inputs. I was going to kind of do a bit in the meeting, but to be perfectly honest, you need to sit and read it. It's not a huge amount. It's not a huge amount, probably like a page and a half. But if you could do that and put some comments, you don't have to do all of it. If you just look at the 3 questions and put some comments and comment on what they've done as well, then we can get a complete picture for all of us, really. So I'll get those out to you later today, tomorrow. And if you would do that, I'd be really grateful.
Yeah, that's on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
On my fire engineering question, if you could do a brain dump of people, I'll try and provide a context, Chris, but what's in my mind at the moment is doing it for existing buildings, because that's probably the biggest area that certainly, you know, I think we've got as a challenge at the moment. So maybe people who are the challenge is, what does a fire engineer actually mean? Because obviously it's a professional qualification, I think, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I imagine the context in which, I think that's what you're saying, the context in which those people are working, whether they're fire engineering experts around ventilation, for example, or even as specific as around AOVs or something like that, or are there fire engineers that are actually looking at things from a, you know, is a fire engineer the person that would define what the fire strategy is for the whole building?
Yes.
And if that's the case, that obviously, ideally, that's done before the building's designed and built. But once it's up there, I imagine that a fire engineer would be the person that would look at the existing fire strategy and then look at whether that was still viable for that particular context. Am I right on that?
I think there's probably a lot of them are making a very handsome living at the Georgia doing exactly that. Looking at what the fire strategy should be, you know, what the building is actually giving the client or the owner in terms of safety, yes or no, and then trying to suggest remediations where remediations are required. I know this for a fact because we are regularly contacted. I have a building, it's been up 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I've got my cavities are closed up now. How do I get a cavity barrier in? Well, you're going to have to take some panels off my old floor. That's the only way you're going to do it, you know, or use one of these super wizard retrofit, or fill the cavity completely, blow it full of mineral wool. Okay, and George, there are people, the fire engineers, the fire engineering community are doing all of that. They're doing new build, but I would hazard a guess a lot of them are working feverishly away, trying to create a case to satisfy the requirements for safety for existing buildings.
Well, so this is what I'm thinking, that if we, for example, could a lot of this stuff, I think, from an information perspective and from a process perspective, there should be a way of standardizing that, so that they're following a method of assessing.
For certain parts of the building,
Steve's like, yes, Steve's laughing at the moment. Is that not possible, Steve? I'm just thinking whether there's a process that could therefore be. I'm not saying it would be, you know, a checklist, but maybe a process that we could potentially follow. What do you think?
Well, you know, everyone frowns on checklists, but it's a way of ensuring that we've actually not missed something, and just has to be relevant to the actual building per se. So it needs to actually have all the items that have in a generic form. So that mostly hopefully would be non-applicable, but it won't be. If we don't now list it on the sod's law, we missed it. And why haven't we challenged that? And rightly saying it's got to be done early. We've got to somehow just educate clients to realise they've got to prepare these projects with sufficient time, not held to the floor as the industry's been doing for too long.
Yeah, but on existing buildings, that's a different thing, isn't it? It's a matter of. So I'm just wondering whether we could have that as maybe we get half a dozen or so fire engineers to work collaboratively. Paul?
Sure, I think what you kind of got to break it down by, I think it's like Chris was saying about the PAS 9 thing with the facades, right, which is going on. It's like you want someone that does regulatory reform, fire safety order kind of inspections, and you want maybe someone from the front end, because this just looking from my lenses, what you find is that I have to give a tremendous amount of support to fire engineers at the start to make sure we get products right, including the supply chain. And when it all goes right, I said earlier, no one gives you any thanks. When it goes wrong, they go, how did that go wrong? It's like crazy because you didn't do the same thing we're doing there, right? Because they don't know how to do it. Then you've got the bit at the end when you hand over information. That's only as good as that doing that bit at the start. So that bit's wrong, and you get someone that comes in from regulatory reform. They're not going to understand. And I think you said this yourself there earlier, Andrew. Was it the right type of wall in the first place? Was the distances right? Was the board overlap correctly? Actually, if it's a smoke control system, is the anchor correct for the rod that's being used? Because when you test smoke control ducts in a furnace, you test the rod, the anchor is specific to a different standard for how the anchor needs to be selected. It's all this kind of stuff that, you know what I mean? So that's what I was saying earlier, that the biggest thing is the first inspection of that compartmentation device, whether in static, transient or dynamic, is the one where that bit's all wrapped up. then from regulatory reform, you're inspecting, actually nothing's changed against it. That's all that's the where you got to get to. So you probably want someone, Jules, that does regulatory reform, fire and safety inspections, and maybe a few people that do up front, or maybe a business that does both, which they don't always do.
I was going to say that there's two bits to it. As you said, there's a qualification of being a fire engineer, as a qualification as an individual, but then they may work for a firm that they advise generically about, as a, alongside a structural engineer, but they're not signing as a company off as being a fire engineer. So we have some surveyors which have fire knowledge people, if you like, or even fire qualified people, but they won't sign off the bit that says I am the fire engineer. Yeah. So we then have another fire engineer who's just being the fire engineer. And usually they talk to each other and they speak the same language, and that's fine. But one of them's got insurance to sign the bit that says I'm the fire engineer, and one hasn't. So they've both got the same training, but the company they work for isn't set up to be that specialist or not. So there's a difference between the company and the individual. The company and the individual can vary quite a bit.
That's not the company that begins with A at the front and ends in G, is it?
No, not that one particularly. No. There was a couple we got with me.
That's quite.
It is quite common. Quite common is that yes, I know it, and I will tell you it, but I can't. My insurance won't let me. Quite a lot of. In fact, one fire engineering company started doing one thing for us, and then halfway through, their insurance suddenly said, "No, you can't do anymore."
Yeah,
and they suddenly got pulled. So their knowledge has not changed one iota, but insurance level meant that they suddenly couldn't do it anymore.
That's the if you're AIFE like me, you can't do it anymore. But if you're MIFE, you can do it. It's the AB person. They changed the rules on it. That's happened to a lot of them.
Yeah, sometimes it's how many claims they've had in a company. They just go, you've run out of money. Basically, you've had too many claims, or there's not actual claims, but the potential, the risk level you've built up over the number of buildings you've done. You've filled up with. But when they're coming onto a forum like this, and you're saying, look, we're not talking about you as a company, we're talking about you as your knowledge as a fire engineer, then that can be a lot more open, and it's about a forum of information. Then the individual, that's probably fine, isn't it? It's not the same as the company.
Exactly.
It's all a good input.
Okay. Richard, do you want to wrap things up?
Just got to take this call back in a second.
Okay.
So just to remind, just a reminder then, if I'll get those sent out to you from the design group, well, probably later on this afternoon. And if you could get back, that'd be fantastic. Right. Other than that, I'll see you in a couple of months. Oh, and don't forget the meeting on the 9th with Chris Waterman, government advisor guy. We're having some more special meetings actually, which you'll hear about, with special guest meetings, which we'll keep you updated as and when.
Has anybody else on the call? Sharon, are you still there? You're on mute at the moment.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Has this been helpful from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate enough to see Paul's presentation before, but obviously I have quite a few contacts with the fire engineers, so if I can help you contact them or encourage them to attend, then I'm more than happy.
No, that'd be great. If you wouldn't mind, dropping maybe a couple of contacts down for me, I'd be most grateful.
I think it'd be easier is I think it was Stephen or Chris had mentioned. I think if we can give them what the scope, what the interest is, because it may be the person that I deal with isn't the correct contact. So maybe just an introductory email out to us, and we can forward it on to those that we know.
Okay,
that would be beneficial. But
I
love the infographics.
Sorry, just quickly, Sharon has put a couple of very interesting posts on LinkedIn over the last couple of days. So if you get a chance, have a look.
Yeah, the more followers, the better.
No, it's some good stuff, Sharon. Very, very good.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any comments? No? I think we've run over quite substantially, but hopefully it's been worthwhile.
Yes, thank you.
Cheers.
All right, cheers, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, bye.
Bye now. Take care.